solar flares, you could very well have a situation where the grid could go down and stay down.
All right, specifically, the financial collapse is going to cause massive crime increase. We're already seeing it. How is that going to affect things? And when you talk about refugees on the road, break that down.
Well, basically, all the urban areas will be total write-offs, and the suburbs are going to get swarmed by refugees from the urban areas. There will be so many people that find their urban and suburban homes uninhabitable that there'll be a huge number of refugees. Once the water no longer magically comes out of the tap and the lights don't magically come on when you flip the switch and the toilets don't flush, your typical urban apartment building is going to be absolutely uninhabitable. It'll be a public health nightmare. We'll have refugees on the road within just a few days. And if you look at it demographically, we now have 2% of the population feeding the other 98%. Well, what happens to the farmers that live fairly close to the suburbs? They're going to get swarmed. So suddenly, we're going to be a situation where even if farmers are still producing, how are they going to get their crops to market? How are they going to live in safety to feel safe running trucks and tractors and their farm equipment or taking care of their livestock?
And the globalists are going to show up after all this collapse and bring in collectivism to, quote, fix it. And we're going to have all of the people from the cities telling us that we've got to share with them and that we're their slaves, and the government's going to hand them machine guns. That's probably what's going to happen.
Yes, that very well could be. If you look at politics, just look at what happened with the collectivism in Stalinism and what happened to the kulaks in Siberia and in the Ukraine in the 1920s, 1930s, and 1940s. There was depopulation because they tried to implement collectivism. People rebelled. Anyone who hid their crops was treated as a traitor and shot on sight. And then they ended up having killed the people who knew how to produce things. And they ended up with a downward spiral. We could very well see the same situation in our country, but the situation would be even worse because, again, we have only 2% of the population feeding the other 98%. The people that have the know-how to feed America, it's a fairly small number of people. If we end up in a societal collapse situation, people are going to end up, eating the golden goose, basically.
Let me ask you this question. It wouldn't be the first time it's happened in history. In your own mind, personally, when do you decide to take action defensively? People are climbing over your fence, over your wall. Come on, give us food. We need it. And then you're like, you owe it to us. And they pull a shotgun out. Or the local cops under Homeland pull up and demand house to house, give us your storable food.
If it comes down to that, you're in a very dicey situation. If it's a situation with looters, I would predict that in the majority of situations, if you start cranking off a few rounds over the heads of looters, they're going to go find somebody else to go loot. They'll find a softer target. If you come up against your own local government, that's a very sticky situation and one that's almost imponderable. All I can say is don't put all your eggs in one basket. You need to have food cached in several different places, preferably underground, so that if somebody comes and takes part of it, they're not going to get all of it.
Yeah, I'm not telling people what they should do, but at the point that government, which we're used to, robbing us 100 different ways, is trying to... My point is, if they come and want to take food or something, that's one issue. The minute anybody tries to take my family or we're taking you into custody because the Homeland says, you cannot go to that horrible, sprawling prison structure they're going to have because it's going to be run and peopled by bestial perverts that like to inhabit such facilities.
Yeah, the last thing you want to be is either a refugee or a prisoner in a situation like that. All I can say is people need to be able to stand their ground. They need to plan in advance and think through the situations of when they'll, basically a fight or flight decision, when you're going to flee your property, when you're going to stand your ground. But the last thing you want to do is end up either a refugee on the road or some guy in the back of a truck with a bag over your head with cable ties around your wrists heading off to points unknown.
And they've certainly, talking to people you know in the government, what percentage are hardcore, psycho types that are really looking forward to all this? Because from my research, most of them are actually overall good people. They've just been naive. They now know this is real. I don't think a lot of them are actually going to follow the orders. I think they'll have some well-publicized events to make the mercenaries look like victims. They're going to try to use mercenaries in a lot of cases. I don't think they're going to have the muscle early on to do this. I see it as deep into the collapse. Then the reorganizational government comes in.
Right, and that's the scenario I put forth in my novel, Patriots, and its sequel, Survivors, and the next one that's coming out in September is called Founders. That's basically the situation I put forth there, where there was a collapse and then a power vacuum that was filled primarily by foreign mercenaries. It's difficult to predict what will happen, but all I can say is people need to think these things through and take action. They need to stock up now. They need to team up with their like-minded friends and neighbors and fellow church congregants and plan and cross-train and get ready.
All right, stay there. By the way, I didn't even know you had a new book coming out, but see, it's reality-based, so I could guess it. I guess it's the foreign UN mercs versus the new founders of the new republic. Am I right? We'll find out when we get back. Straight ahead.
Don't want no shackles.
Our guest will be with us about 20 minutes into the next hour to get into some practical solutions, some basics of where to start. I hope we're wrong about all this, but unfortunately we're not. The question is just how bad will it get? We're just hoping for just a regular depression, but with this spoiled population, not everybody, but certain elements, it's going to be nasty. The toll-free number to join us is 800-259-9231. Specific questions for the author of Survivors, a novel of the coming collapse. He's got another one, Founders, coming out, and he said I did basically guess a little bit of the plot correctly, but that's in September. We'll obviously have to have him up if we're still around then. But 800-259-9231. Mike Adams is going to be popping in the last 15 minutes of the show or so, I believe. We get that set up because he's got breaking news. It's at Infowars.com and naturalnews.com. Remember, the UN model to shut down small farms is to say your pigs and cows are invasive. It's not a certified, big agri facility. So they announced all these dozens of old breeds. If they have red hair, black hair, spots, whatever, or any other feature, government is going to have, quote, armed raids, arrest you, and kill them, calling it a feral hog problem. It's hundreds of years of hogs getting out, interbreeding, and just going wild. I've shot probably 20 of them or more. I mean, we've got a family ranch infested with them. But that's not our pigs. We used to raise regular pigs out there, the regular old pink ones and others. I forget all the names of them. The point is that now they take that and use it as a way to create a new revenue. People said, they're not going to go on farms and kill them. Don't be a fearmonger. It's happened. Michigan government unleashes armed raids on small pig farmers, forces farmer to shoot all his own pigs. Armed raids, it's all happening. It's at Infowars.com right now by Mike Adams. I want to get into some solutions real quick here with you, but what do you make of the harassment, the animal ID, premises ID, which then Big Agra is exempt from?
Yeah, it all ties back to the NAIS, which is the National Animal Identification System, which was an abortive system they tried setting up several years ago, but they never really quit. They basically are doing the same thing and calling it a different name. And you're right, they will be exempting the major producers. Same thing, by the way, is in the works right now. There's calls for veterinary medicines to be restricted to only being released by prescription, and that's going to make life difficult for small farmers, and of course for anyone who's preparedness-minded, who's laid in a supply of inexpensive animal antibiotics to use in the event of a societal collapse. Well, that supply will be going away. And, of course, they'll probably exempt major producers. I recently wrote about that in my blog.
Yeah, they're going to turn the DEA loose, basically, federal goons. I mean, everybody knows you're running even 100 head of cattle. You've got antibiotics. You've got other shots you've got to give them. You buy it from the vet. You're not doing that anymore.
Yeah, of course, it'll just be the small producers they clamp down on, they'll exempt the major producers and say, oh, well, you won't require a veterinarian prescription. But for anybody who has just a few cows or a few sheep or a few goats, then you're going to be behind the eight ball.
And they're the ones that lobby for it. Just last year, $15 million was spent in 1 week trying to put the Safe Food Act through, which was written by Big Agri to shut down where you can't even pick strawberries and serve them to your neighbor. I mean, just total tyranny.
Again, as I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, we are living in the age of deception and betrayal.
We're just a bunch of cold-blooded multinational corporations that are monopoly men in an anti-free market saying, turn this place into a prison. If it isn't bought from our big box store, it's shut down. And the FBI and the rest of the government's like, yes, sir. We'll be back in 60 seconds with some solutions and your calls. All right, your calls are coming up in the next segment. Shoot, I might just twist our gift right to the 30 after, because then we got Mike Adams coming on. I got a bunch of other news I haven't even gotten to, but it's all just crazy. Whatever tyrannical governments have done in the past, the crooks that run ours are taking it, dusting it off, updating it, and using it. It's just, we've got cancer as a country and as a world. It's called the New World Order. 1776 worldwide is the solution. We have James Wesley Rawles, best-selling author, our guest. We're going to go to your calls in the next segment. Let's get into a few practical basics people can do now, because the most common call I get is, I live in a city, I make, $12 an hour, my wife does, we got a comfortable blue-collar existence, but that's it. We don't have money for anything. What do we do?
Well, I recommend that people reorder their budget priorities. It's time for people to do away with their cable TV subscription. It's time for them to sell their flat-screen television, sell their jet ski, get back to the basics. Try to work down your debt and stock up on all the basics. All your staple foods, get a good, reliable weapon, practice with it, train with it to the best of your ability. If you can't afford to go to a top-flight school like Front Sight or Gun Sight or Thunder Ranch, then at least get training locally through your local NRA affiliate. Get involved with the Appleseed program. They offer excellent training. But get your basics squared away. If you don't have a 6-month supply of your family of food for your family squared away, you're behind the power curve. If you don't have the money for that, you need to sell your Hummel collection, sell your stamp collection, whatever it takes. Skip taking your vacation this year and reprioritize your budget and get those basics squared away. Get a good quality water filter. Make arrangements to, if you live in a typical suburban house, to set up your downspout so you can capture rainwater off your roof. Get squared away with non-hybrid gardening seeds. If you don't have fencing to keep deer out, get the fencing in. You're going to have to plan through all these different things to be ready